This is what we're working on. Here's our big evil tentacle beast. Do you guys like the X-Men? I am a pretty big X-Men fan. I have probably a good 150 issues of the comic in its various forms back there in the closet. At one point, that was the only thing I read. The only thing I read as far as comics went was, I think I read Captain America, the Hulk, and the X-Men. Like, that was my thing. And, eventually kind of started leaning a little bit more towards the Avengers, because the X-Men was always really heavy, and you had to be in the mood for it. But mainly I read the X-Men because of Wolverine. I was more of a Wolverine fan, so I eventually just started collecting Wolverine, like his solo book. Still read the X-Men. I really liked the Astonishing X-Men run with Joss Whedon. I actually have all the trades of that. That was one of my favorite runs. X-Men have always been what you would call today woke. That's always been a thing with the X-Men, all the way back into the 80s, as far as I can remember, and even before that. The X-Men was an allegory for the Civil Rights Act. And I know that it wasn't originally planned like that. That wasn't the plan from the beginning. The plan from the beginning is that they were just going to be superheroes, because that's what Marvel, that was their job, is to create superhero stories. And as time went on through the 60s, they kind of took elements from the Civil Rights Act and whatnot that were, remember, those things were actually happening in the world at that time. And they sort of wrote these elements into the story of, the X-Men mutants as an allegory for race and stuff like that. And then as it went on, it evolved. And nowadays it's like mutants, they're an allegory for being gay. I think the very first X-Men movie back in 2000 even had, or was it X2? I think it was X2. You remember that part where they go to Iceman's house and his mom is like, have you tried not being a mutant? Like that kind of thing. It's like, that's the joke. Like it's sort of like he comes out to his family there. That's the allegory, right? So X-Men have always kind of been woke, and it's really funny to see people losing their minds over the X-Men 97 cartoon because it is quote-unquote woke. Which it really isn't. If you watch it, it's not. No. Like when you say, okay, so what the fuck does woke actually mean, number one? When these chuds say woke, what do you think? What comes to your mind? You think, oh, it's everyone in the show is like, they've swapped all of their genders. They made everybody gay, something like that. They're running around, that kind of thing, and it's like, not even close. That's not what happened at all. They're literally adapting the storylines and elements and characters from the comic and changing them very little. The one thing I think they changed was that there's a character named, what's his name? Morph, I think. It's like a changeling type character. And they made him non-binary, which fits perfectly well. You think if you were a character that you could change your sex at any time you want, you'd think that you would be non-binary, right? And I think that was the thing they made, but I'm not sure if it's like that in the comics or not. I don't know, and honestly, I don't really care to find out. That's a change that fits. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like they made Professor X gay, or Scott Summers gay, or Rogue trans or something. Like, those might be changes that ultimately end up being good, but are a big departure from the character. And you can understand why somebody might get upset at those. It's not like they did that. It's like they took like a logical development for a character that would logically be that way. So I don't know what the big fucking problem with that is all about. So anyway, it's kind of like we have these guys who every time Marvel puts out something, they have to instantly say it sucks. And that's what's going on with the X-Men 97 cartoon, And this sort of started with Captain Marvel a few years back when the first Captain Marvel movie came out. and all these guys hated Brie Larson because she said something, which I can't remember. She said something about white males or some shit, and that made all of these fucking, like, MRM dickheads lose their fucking minds over it. And now every time a new Marvel movie comes out, all these guys are praying for it to bomb. And, like, that's why it was such a big deal when the Marvels bombed. It's like, oh, they were all vindicated. No, we told you it was gonna bomb, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's literally the first Marvel property to, like, fucking ever bomb. Right? Like, it's the first movie. Actually, no, it's the second movie. The actual first Marvel movie that bombed was fucking, I think, the Inhumans. The Inhumans was, like, released as a movie, the pilot episode, and that bombed. But anyway, so this is a guy... And I think his name is... What's his name? His name is Alpha Eagle. Okay. And his avatar is a big buff eagle man with an American flag. He's going to tell us that the X-Men 97 is shitty. His video is called White Man Bad. My thoughts on X-Men 97, Episode 6, Life Death, Part 2. Let's listen to what he has to say. Nice intro. That admittedly was a
Hey everyone, Alpha Eagle here again. Welcome back to my channel. I pray you're all doing well, and may God bless you all. I'm continuing my coverage of the woke garbage known as X-Men 97. To sum up, Episode 6, Professor X is about to marry Lilandra until he sees a vision of Gambit's death and decides to return to Earth. Meanwhile, Storm regains her powers and defeats Adversary through the power of positive thinking, I guess. And again, I saved you a half hour of wasted time. You're welcome. There are those on my side of the aisle who actually recommend this series and claim it's not woke.
By the way, Rogue gets her powers back because Forge creates a device that gives her powers back. That's how she gets them back. So, I don't know where he's getting this, like, the power of positive thinking shit from. But whatever. Okay, continuing.
That's a total lie. This show is very woke, as you can see by this episode, and this is the White Man Bad episode. And even if this series wasn't woke, it's still a bad series. For example, this episode is boring. Not much actually happens, and there's barely any action. It's mostly just talking. Anyway, I was right. Like I said in my last video, Professor X is still alive. But that's not a very hard prediction to make. Anybody with a functioning brain could have figured that one out. But anyone who actually thought he was dead, let me ask you this question. How was your trip to school on that short bus? Anyway, this episode starts with the...
I love how these guys have to, like, make jokes at the expense of other people. Like, he literally could have said anything there. He could have said anything, and he chose to make an R-word joke. Right? That's what it is. He chose to make a joke at the expense of children who are developmentally impaired. Because, remember... that bus is a school bus for children, so he chose to punch down at children. That's the kind of guy we're dealing with. Let's continue.
Shi'ar attacking the Kree, with Ronan the Accuser being defeated way too easily by Deathbird. But of course she does, because he's a man, and men are pathetic and weak in this series. Deathbird has sent a message from her sister.
So, Deathbird is kind of really powerful in the comics. She's sort of like the Shi'ar version of Wolverine. So there's no reason why she shouldn't be able to beat Ronan the Accuser. I mean, what exactly are Ronan the Accuser's powers anyway? He's just super strong and he's got a hammer. And, like, that's it. You know, let's look that up. Let's look that up because, honestly, I don't know off the top of my head Ronan the Accuser's power level. So let's see. Ronan the Accuser powers. Yeah, he actually doesn't have powers. He just has armor. That's what, okay, according to Wikipedia, he just has armor that can, like, do stuff. So he's like Iron Man is what he is. That's it. Yeah, so he doesn't even have powers. So Deathbird, let's look at Deathbird's powers. Let's see, Deathbird's powers. Genetic mutant who belongs to the Shi'ar species. Superhuman strength, speed, agility, stamina, flexibility, reflexes, coordination, balance, endurance. Well above average limits of her race. Formidably trained warrior of great skill and cunning. Having trained the likes of Gladiator. So, yeah, she can fly. She could flex her wing to throw Miss Marvel off the building or to the wall. So she's super strong. Fingernails are essentially talons which can score, steal, and tear through substances such as bone and tissue easily. basically Deathbird is super strong and has superpowers, and Ronan the Accuser doesn't. So he's pissed because the more powerful character won in a fight. But if you notice, the real reason he's pissed is because a woman beat a man. A fictional woman beat a man in this tale of fiction about aliens and shit and superheroes. That's why this guy's mad. It kind of goes to show, the thing about all of these sort of like anti-woke chuds, they don't really know the source material. They're not really fans. They just sort of are doing this shit for a paycheck. And like even that right there kind of shows it. It's like the guy didn't bother looking up the characters to see if that's like something that would plausibly happen according to the in-universe rules of the story. He's letting his politics dictate his enjoyment of the story, which is a very shitty way to enjoy comics, if you ask me.
Lilandra, and the message is that she is engaged to be married to Charles Xavier. In my video on episode 4, I said that Jubilee treated Sunspot like a pet. Many people disagreed with me, claiming that this show doesn't disrespect men, and that they're not shown as weak and pathetic. But then Charles says this.
The Empress, Lilandra Niramani, and her royal consort.
Your man speaks as if I am your pet. Not an entirely displeasing thought.
Hush now, beloved. You may bark later.
See, I told you.
Okay.
The show even admits that men are treated like pets, even suggesting that Charles is a cuck who wants to be dominated by women.
Wow. That's not what I got from that exchange. Charles is a cuck that wants to be dominated by women. So, Lilandra there is the queen of the Shi'ar race. So, by the way, this is an adaptation of a storyline from the early 90s. So this actually happened in the comics. What happens is that Charles Xavier goes off and becomes the consort of the queen of the Shi'ar. So the bird people, they're called the Shi'ar, right? Charles Xavier, he's paralyzed, he can't walk, and they cure that so that he can walk. I believe they clone his body or something like that. So it's like he's actually in a cloned body or something like that, if I remember right. I can't really exactly remember. So yeah, he's like walking around and stuff, and it's like a big reveal. A big deal that it's like, oh, Charles Xavier, he's alive and he can walk again. And he's like the fucking consort of the queen of this empire. I mean, this is actually some shit from the comics, right? So that's the first thing. They didn't just make this up for this cartoon or whatnot. Secondly, I think this guy, has he never actually heard that trope before? Oh, please, my pet. Seriously? Like, you've never heard the trope of a king or an emperor or something calling their sort of mistress or whatever a pet? How is that depowering for a man? So it's perfectly fine when a woman is the object of the affection there, right? How many times have you seen a story or a cartoon or read in a book or seen a TV show where like a powerful rich man has a younger woman and says, yes, my pet, calls her my pet, whatever, as a term of affection? So why is it such a big fucking deal when it just happens to be the other way around? It's Charles Xavier, who's not the king. He's not the king of the empire. He's the consort. He's the mistress here. Why is it such a big fucking deal when the queen of the empire refers to her consort as a pet? It's like a term of... has this guy really never heard that before? I kind of find that hard to believe. That's the other thing about these guys. It's like, these guys lie. This dude and like fucking, no bullshit. And like, what's the other guy? Jeremy. These sorts of anti-woke sort of culture warrior dickheads who basically make all these fucking anti-woke videos and complain every time something comes out. They have to bitch and moan about it. That's the other thing. These guys lie and misrepresent the stories like a lot. It doesn't seem right to me that someone, if you're a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of comics, or just sci-fi, fantasy in general, that you would never have encountered this trope before. Makes it sound like he's making it up, but let's continue.
Again, proving that not only do the writers of this show hate men, they also don't understand the characters. Anyway, Deathbird is not...
How the fuck do they hate men? What, because Charles Xavier is not in charge? Because he likes to have sex, I guess. Because that's what I got out of that scene. But why would they hate the characters? This storyline is literally being adapted from the comics. And it's actually pretty close. If you haven't seen X-Men 97 yet, it's a pretty close adaptation to the storylines in the comics. It's condensed a lot, but generally it tends to follow the storylines from the comics, and generally the major beats tend to align with what's going on the comics. You know, they condense it a lot. Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. It's actually really good, but it's not like they're creating this for this show. So to sit here and be like, oh, they don't understand the characters. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? This is how the characters were written in the comics. This isn't like one of the MCU movies where they just sort of do their own thing and just use the general look and feel and characterizations from the comics and adapt it. You know, I compare this show. This show is very similar to, like, say, Invincible. If you ever watch Invincible on Amazon, how it's a pretty close adaptation of the comics. They change a couple of things, but for the most part, it generally follows the story of what the comics like. That's what's going on in X-Men 97. It's actually really good. To sit here and be like, oh yeah, they don't understand it. It's like, no, dude, you're the one who doesn't fucking understand it. Moving on.
Not happy with the news that her sister is marrying Charles, since Charles is not a Shi'ar and he's from a different planet. And frankly, she's right. The Shi'ar should be ruled by someone from the Shi'ar homeworld, just as the American president should be born in America. You know the show's bad when they make you root...
But Charles isn't ruling the Shi'ar Empire. See, he's fundamentally misunderstanding what the story is. First off, I don't really believe that he even believes that myself. What did he just basically say there? Oh, well, the Shi'ar should be ruled by someone who was born in the Shi'ar Empire, just like the American president should be born in America. Okay, fine. I guess the Constitution does say that. That kind of sounds like an underhanded dig at immigrants to me. Charles Xavier is not the king of the Shi'ar. He's the consort of their queen. He's not making decisions. So they're going to get married, but the queen is the one that has the power. He's going to be the royal consort. He's not going to be king of the Shi'ar. So that's bullshit. It's like you don't understand even what, like, you're not even representing the story correctly. It's like he's injecting his politics in it and misrepresenting what the fucking story is so that he can take political digs at it. Guy's kind of a fucking liar. Moving on.
For the supposed villain. Anyway, Deathbird demands that Charles proves his loyalty by erasing all of his memories of his past life, including the X-Men. Now, I think this is a little harsh, but again, I kind of agree with Deathbird. For example, a foreign person who wants to become a citizen of the US, they should assimilate to our culture and pledge loyalty to our country.
That is exactly what happens, by the way, when you become a citizen of the United States. That's what you have to do. So, what's your problem? How are you comparing? How does, but we don't make our citizens remove their memories. We don't, like, strap someone to a chair and then brainwash them into becoming United States citizens and remove their fucking memories of their previous life or whatever. Like, we don't do that. If you become a citizen here, there's nothing wrong. There's no law saying you can't go back and visit your family in your previous country. There's no law that says you can't go move back to your previous country and still remain an American citizen. You can do that, right? You can live as an American citizen and live abroad in another country. There's no law against that. So how does that even compare to forcing someone to remove their memories? Like, no, we don't force people to cut all ties with their previous country and their friends and family when you become an American citizen. You can even be a dual citizen here. You can be a citizen of the United States and England, and Canada and Mexico, whatever, at the same time. Like, these people, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They have a very, very warped perception of what patriotism actually is and what it actually means to be a citizen and actually have loyalty to one's country. These guys don't actually know. They just, it's kind of embarrassing to, like, stand there with an American flag on your avatar when the shit you're saying is like really anti-American. Moving on.
Agrees to go through with this ritual which will wipe his mind of his past. But then they ask him to forget the X-Men and Charles hesitates, which causes a fight to break out. Then Charles uses his powers to kidnap the major members of this conflict and bring them to the astral plane. Then the episode goes full woke as Charles humiliates them as he sets them down in a child's classroom. And what's the subject of this struggle session? Critical race theory. Charles then condescendingly lectures the Shi'ar people, telling them that they are the villains of history. They are the evil white colonizers. And if they didn't colonize those other societies, and if those societies were allowed to develop on their own, they would be empires themselves equal to the Shi'ar Empire.
Yes, that is true. He does in this show, he gives them a lesson on why being an imperial power is bad. He does. I don't see how that amounts to critical race theory, which kind of goes to show that this dude doesn't really know what critical race theory is. Critical race theory is not what Charles Xavier says in the show here. Charles Xavier basically says that the subjugation of other races in order to facilitate your imperial product, your imperial project, is ultimately self-defeating because all empires eventually fall. And you would be better off essentially bringing, helping through mutual cooperation and stuff like that, and not conquering. That's essentially what Charles Xavier says in that scene, which is true. It's absolutely true, because empires do eventually fall. There is no such thing as a perpetual empire, right? Because what ends up happening is that the empire requires conquest, further expansion in order to survive. And once your nation hits that point where it can't survive without expanding, then it's on its way out, because the imperial model is not sustainable. Long story short, in so many words. That's what he teaches those people. That's not critical race theory. Critical race theory is a study about essentially systemic racism. That's what critical race theory is, right? CTR, critical race theory. It's a thing that they don't even teach in schools. They teach it in law schools. And it's about systemic racism, institutional racism, things about how laws affect people of different races in different ways. Things like redlining during the 60s when it came to giving home loans and stuff. Things like how certain criminal laws affect people of different races in different ways. Like, say, the sentencing disparities between crack and powdered cocaine, for example. That's what critical race theory is. Another thing that affects people in different ways, voting laws, requiring voter ID, and then the types of ID that you accept. Like I said in my last segment there. A good example of that is Texas. In Texas, you have to have an ID in order to vote, and they'll accept certain types of IDs that white people tend to have in Texas, say like a firearm license. You're allowed to use that to vote in Texas. And you can't use your student ID for a college. You cannot use that to vote. Even if the student ID has a photo on it, because the law says photo ID. Even if the student ID has a photo on it, can't use it. They exclude that on purpose. Why? Because they want certain people to vote and certain other people not to vote, and this is an example how they can control that using voter ID. And that's an example. That's the type of thing that you study in critical race theory. It has nothing to fucking do with white man bad. And just another example that these guys don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I could go to 16 different conservative creators. I could go to Tim Pool, and I could go to The Quartering, and I could go to like Jordan Peterson or whatever, and I could ask them what is critical race theory, and they would all give different answers. Because it's like they don't know. It's just shit they're making up. This guy has no fucking clue what critical race theory is. He just saw, Professor X is giving a lecture about how imperialism is bad. This must be something bad against white people. It's bullshit. Moving on.
And going to bring us back to the real world for a second and say that everything Charles said was BS. Colonization done by people of European descent has been very positive for this world. All cultures are not equal. never colonized non-European countries, the non-Europeans would still be living in huts with no electricity, no running water, no modern conveniences at all. They would still be fighting, raping, cannibalizing, and enslaving each other, and dying of diseases at the age of 30. So the idea that non-European countries would have thrived and evolved to the level of the United States all on their own is nonsense. Wakanda is not real, folks. It could never have been real, and it will never be real. So let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, there you go. If you wondered why these guys say shit like that, there it is. Alpha Eagle just let he didn't just let the mask slip there. Holy fuck, he like stripped that shit off. He went completely mask off right there. Wow. See, that's the thing that you gotta, like, when it comes to these fucking, like, racist Nazi fucks like this, they have to justify it in their minds. They look around, they see the suffering of people and the subjugation of other countries and millions of people of other races on other continents, and they say that's a good thing. You just heard the man say it right there. I don't think I could explain it any better than he just said. He sees the subjugation of other people in Africa, especially he went out of his way to mention Africa. Africa and South America, he mentioned Indians there. He called them cannibals. He said they would never reach the level of civilization that their European colonizers brought to them. I mean, I don't really see why I need to explain that, how incredibly ridiculous and racist and untrue that shit is. I think what the man just said there speaks for himself. There you go. And this is the guy telling us that fucking X-Men is woke. This is the guy saying that X-Men is like spreading propaganda. You know, he's gonna sit here and tell us that everyone who isn't white is fucking subhuman. And we should be falling on our knees thanking our white saviors for bringing us civilization, for bringing the civilization to animals. Like every day I should be waking up saying, thank you, white man, thank you. How can I kiss your ass a little bit more, Mr. White Man? Thank you for bringing me all of these wonderful fucking things. Taxes and drugs and war and school shootings. Thank you for bringing me all this fucking stuff. Thank you for lording over everything over me. Thank you for making our society that you have to like have money to even survive. And then thank you for taking away all of the ability for people to actually make money. Thank you for exploiting people in soulless fucking jobs that you get, you know, increasingly harder to get, and then eventually you're just going to automate everything away so you don't need us anyway. Because remember, to this guy, you're essentially a slave. If you're not born with the right genetics that he finds appealing, then you might as well have not have been born at all, and your existence is just to serve people like him. That's what he thinks. And he thinks anybody who says otherwise is some kind of commie who's trying to destroy America. You know, you can't bargain with people like this. There is no both sides to this equation. Because you hear this a lot, especially from people on the right. These guys just have concerns. They're concerned about their country changing, and they don't want to see... They see it changing for the worse. They see crime getting worse and blah, 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 and all this other bullshit. And, you know, they have valid concerns. How many times have you heard that from people? Oh, they're just Trump voters. They're just concerned citizens and all that. And they have valid concerns about the state of their country. This is the kind of shit the guy's concerned about. He's concerned about people he thinks are like fucking non-humans from gaining actual power and respect in what he thinks is his country. I don't know, folks. I mean, am I wrong? You heard it out of the man's mouth himself. I don't think I need to add very much fucking more to that. There's still a few more minutes. Let's listen to a few more.
Think about what Charles just did. Think about the audacity and the disrespect it took for him to do that. He's a foreigner. He's a guest to their planet. They took him in, they fed him, they clothed him, they gave him a place to stay, and they even supplied him with the technology that gave him the ability to walk in. And what does he do? Napped them, and he forced them to listen to his lecture on how they are the bad guys, and that he is morally superior to them, and that they should be ruled by him, and that they need to conform to him instead of him conforming to them.
Well, first off, Charles Xavier is morally superior to them. I mean, he's not subjugating entire fucking races and conquering them. He's not doing that. He's someone who fights for the rights of his race. Mutants are a race. They're an allegory for a race in the X-Men. In fact, in the universe of the X-Men, Homo sapiens superior is a separate race than Homo sapiens. That's what they are, right? So no, he is the exact opposite of a colonizer. And he is morally superior, right? It is not morally, acceptable to go conquer people and impose your will upon them. That's not true, regardless of the quote-unquote civilization you think you're bringing to those people. It's not right. It is not a morally correct thing, and anybody who thinks so can just fuck right off. That's one of those things that I don't really think I need to argue. Okay? If you don't agree with me, then just turn my channel off, because we will never see eye to eye on that. That's the first thing. Secondly, Charles, once again, is not trying to rule them. Charles is not in charge of the Empire. He's not being crowned the king of the Empire. He's marrying the queen and is going to be the royal consort. He will not be in charge of them. Say, that's some shit that this guy is inserting himself into the story. The story doesn't say that. He's inserting that himself because it fits with his political agenda. It fits with his bullshit fucking idiot white replacement conspiracy theory. Right? That, all the minorities and the black people and the Mexicans or whatever, they're all coming and they're taking away our jobs and they're going to take over the country and they're going to kick all the white people out. You hear this shit over and over and over. It's like complete fucking total bullshit without one iota of a molecule in actual fucking reality. It's the dumbest shit ever of all time, and you have to be a goddamn moron to believe it. But that's the kind of thing these people believe in. Continuing on.
Of people like Ilhan Omar. She's also a foreigner who came to the U.S. as a refugee. We fed her, clothed her, housed her, paid for her education, took care of all her needs, and instead of showing gratitude, she says that we are the bad guys, and she should be ruling over us.
Ilhan Omar is an American citizen. Was she actually born in America? I don't think she was. Ilhan Omar? Let me see. I don't believe she was. I believe she came from... Where did she come from again? Ilhan Omar? I think she's from Somalia? She's not from Palestine, is she? I don't know. Let's find out. Ilhan Omar. Okay, where is she from? She was born in Somalia. That's what I thought. But Ilhan Omar is not someone who is trying to rule over anyone. She doesn't say America are the bad guys. She doesn't do that at all. She's running for Congress because she wants to make America better. Better than it is now. The United States does lots of bad things out there. And I know people like this American Eagle guy here, they don't believe this because it goes against their worldview. They're in denial of the effects of American imperialism. There wouldn't be a war right now in Israel. There wouldn't be a genocide going on, There would probably be a war still. There wouldn't be a huge genocide if we didn't supply the weapons to Israel, right? They probably would have gotten their shit together decades ago if we didn't kind of help them along. I mean, who knows? Can we really say one way or the other? I don't know. It's my personal belief that if we didn't, have such an overwhelming support for them and everything that they do, if we maybe kind of took a more nuanced stance and stood on the side of human rights, then maybe things might have turned out a little different over there, and the Palestinians may actually have, I don't know, equal rights in the country they were born in. Maybe that could have happened. And that's not the only example of American imperialism. The fingers of American imperialism, they touch on every continent on this earth. In one country, we're helping one group. In another country, we're suppressing another group over and over. It's the same fucking story over and over and over again. People like Ilhan Omar are trying to stop that kind of thing. They're trying to actually make us stand for the things that we say we believe in. Freedom and human rights and stuff like that. So no, that's the complete fucking opposite. What does this guy say, Lanus? Oh, why is he saying it? by the way. Not just, why is he bagging on Ilhan Omar so much? Because she's not white. Because she's also a Muslim, I believe. Like, how many times have you heard them making fun of Ilhan Omar and calling her a terrorist, and Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that she's siding with the Muslim Brotherhood, siding with Al-Qaeda, and all that other fucking bullshit? I mean, anybody out there, if you guys thought that we lived in a post-racial society because we had a black president, no. This guy, and people like him, there's millions upon millions of them. How many followers does this guy have? Let's see. Yeah, not that many. 761 subs. But his video got 2,500 views. So they're out there, folks. Let's listen to a little bit more of this. Continuing.
The lion, the witch, and the audacity on this female dog. It also reminds me of Meghan Markle and how she wants Britain and the royal family to bow to her rule. Anyway, back to the episode. During his forced struggle session with the Shi'ar, Charles sees a vision of the death of Gambit. He decides to call off the wedding and return to Earth, making everything that happened in this episode so far pointless. Now onto the B story. Forge was bitten by...
That is also what happens in the comics, by the way. He does eventually return to Earth. So, I mean, I don't think it happens specifically for that. There's this whole thing about the Macan Crystal and that other storyline, which they leave out of this. I believe they do. But that is essentially what happens in the comics. Basically the same fucking thing, which goes to show that these guys don't even know their own fucking source material. It's all made up. Continuing.
By Adversary, and Storm is trying to heal him. Adversary attacks Storm, and Forge sends Adversary away with a magic spell that he gets from a book. And listen to what they say about Forge's magic book.
It's magical. Perhaps your mother's book holds an answer.
Said that Forge got that magic book from his mother. This was done on purpose. They could have said that he got the book from his parents, but they specifically wanted to credit Forge's mother because, as we've seen earlier, men are inferior in this series, and they are no more than pets to the women. And this is...
Dude, that is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard. Alright. First off, Forge is supposed to be a shaman, right? And they kind of downplay that aspect of his character a little. So, in the comics, he's the one that causes a magic spell which releases the adversary. And so he has to put the adversary back by casting the same magic spell, and then that causes the temporary death of the X-Men. But since it's comic books, they got better. This is actually the Fall of the Mutants storyline from around 1988, issue 256, I think. Right, 257. Right around there is when this happens, if I remember right. So, yes, it is Forge is the one that... This is what happens in the comic book. But why does it matter if he gets the spell from a book that his mother gave him? Why is that a big fucking deal? So you notice here, none of the things this guy is talking about, where he says where it's like, these are all examples of woke, because they're making the men useless and they're giving all the credit to the women. The women are the ones who are strong and men are weak, all that shit. Like, none of these examples actually show that. Like, why does it matter if Forge got the spell from his mom, from his mother, who presumably in this universe taught him how to be a shaman? I mean, there were such things as female shamans, by the way. I mean, I don't know if you knew that, American Eagle Man, but that was a thing. Brujas is what they called him. A Native American. He's supposed to be part Native American. That's where he gets his powers from. And then he also has completely unrelated powers where he builds stuff. It's like Forge is kind of a weird character. But anyway, like, why does it matter, though, if he gets it from his mother? It doesn't change anything about him or his character at all. It fits rather well. That's the first thing. Second thing, are you really telling me that you've never heard of the trope of somebody having a mystic grandmother or a witch grandmother or a mother who teaches them magic? Like, have you never heard of that trope before in comics or science fiction or fantasy or anything? Like, that's like the most overused fucking trope there is. So how the fuck does that make men useless and women empowered when it's... I mean, if anything, if you want to criticize it, you could just say it's bad writing, because it kind of is. There's really no reason for it. It could just be, oh, his shaman powers know it. But so they attribute it to a book from his mother. Like, why does that diminish Forge? It doesn't. See, that's what I mean when these guys make this shit up. It's like, I don't know. There's only 3 minutes left of this. I don't think we're going to really benefit very much from watching the rest. Whoever's out there, this guy is a small-time dude. He's even smaller than me, surprisingly. So don't go fuck with him. Just don't go on his video at all, please. When I review these guys and it's purely for us, it's like, please don't go pick on them. Don't harass them. Don't talk shit to them. Anything like that. Okay, this guy is a guy. He's allowed to say his opinion, whatever. I think his opinion is bullshit. I think what he's saying is stupid and racist. And I think this guy is like one step above fucking some goose-stepping Nazi douchebag. You know, but that's just me. It just really gets me, like, you know, whenever you see these types of videos, like I said before, there's a cottage industry of these assholes. You know, you got this dude, you have like the bigger channels like The Quartering and Geeks and Gamers, and then you have guys like Tim Pool and stuff who occasionally engage in this sort of culture war bullshit. And they just, like, every time anything that has to do with Marvel, specifically Marvel, but also, you know, any superhero stuff in general comes out, they have to shit all over it and call it woke even when it isn't. And this is a good example. You know, the X-Men 97 show is a great example of a show that is actually a very good adaptation, a very close adaptation that mostly sticks to the storylines, how they're written in the comics. I mean, it adapts them, it changes things around. Mostly it condenses stuff. But it's still remarkably closely aligned to how it was originally presented in the books. And it's like, I mean, shit, watch the arc with Madeline Pryor. You know, when Madeline Pryor comes out and then you have the Goblin Queen and all that, you know, episode 2, 3, 4. It's like the exact same fucking thing almost. Pretty, I mean, loosely, you know, it's adapted. And there's lots of stuff that they leave out mostly. But it generally follows the same storyline pretty close. If you were a fan of the X-Men in the late 80s and early 90s, then you will find yourself right at home with X-Men 97. It's not fucking woke. They didn't change it around. They didn't gender bend everybody. They didn't turn everybody gay. They didn't do any of that, anything like that at all that a big, strong, red hat wearing alpha male douchebag should fucking object to. They're literally just making this shit up in order to get clicks. And that's what's really fucking stupid and disturbing about it. And that's what pisses me off, is that it's a fucking cottage industry of assholes who just make up controversy in order to get clicks. And the reason it pisses me off is because an otherwise good show might get overlooked by people because of it. And it's fucked up and it's not right. And also, fuck Nazis.
Hello folks, if you like what I do and you want to support the channel, please consider buying something from my Etsy shop, supporting me on Patreon, liking and subscribing, and checking me out across my social media links listed below. Thank you all so much, and see you next time.